We can't, so we got another 45 seconds according to my iPad. Tim, you can turn us on though if you want. Okay. How'd they do this before iPads? Did they have some like a special clock or something?
Clock on the wall.
Did they?
Yeah, it was just one of those satellite.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or that or a cell phone.
Yeah.
More accurate, clock on the wall or the iPad.
I don't know.
Depends on which one you declared.
All right, good evening, everybody. For the record, this evening is Thursday, November 14th, 2019. It's 5:15 p.m. Time for the regular meeting of Wenatchee City Council. As always, we start our meetings with our pledge to the flag. So, Councilmember Bailey, would you lead us?
I will.
You and rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Bailey.
You're welcome.
And for the record this evening, we have 6 council members present, and Councilmember Esparza is with us via the phone. Ruth, are you there?
I am.
Great, thank you very much. First item on our agenda tonight are the consent items, which includes the approval of this evening's agenda, the vouchers, and the minutes from the previous meetings.
Your Honor, I make a motion to approve the agenda, vouchers, and minutes from previous meetings.
Second?
Motion by Councilmember Huffaker, second by Councilmember Bailey to approve this evening's consent items, which includes the agenda, vouchers, and minutes from our previous meetings. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. I'm working on my timing there. The next item on our agenda is citizen comment. This would be a time if any member of the audience wished to address something that's not on this evening's agenda. We'd ask that you come up. We'd give you 3 minutes. Name and address for the record. We will take public hearings on most of the items tonight. Seeing no takers. We do have one? Oh, come on up. Don't be bashful because I won't see you. Oh, come on up, sit down. Oh, you're going to hand us papers first. Oh, okay. Oh, you can have that. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Okay, you can go up there and sit down and give us your name and address for the record. And
You can turn your nameplate around.
oh, that's all
I
right.
think you know who you are.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilmen and women, and residents from Wenatchee. My name is Doreen Smith. I am a resident of Wenatchee and have been since I moved here in 83 from Canada, and I am a citizen. And I would like to, and my address, did you need, Mayor?
I'd like to have it, yes.
1121 Monroe Street,
Okay.
Wenatchee, Washington. And I would like to address the state of homelessness. We have recently had 3 happenings that brought it to light today. Today I was on my way to Pybus Market to walk, and there were 2 people sleeping in sleeping bags on the ground right up next to the YMCA. And I called the police department and reported it. Going back from that, there was a trailer parked in our alley a few months back, and we are between Monroe Street and Kittitas Street. And I thought it was our friends had come back from the south and went to find out it was a homeless trailer. And I asked the people where they were from, and they said, well, we're looking for a place to stay. And I said, not in this alley. I said, we have people that park across from where you're parked, and they need the room to get in. And they were very nice, and they left. One day, it was in April of this year, and there was a lady with a little child, about maybe 3.5 or 4 years old, and she was walking down the sidewalk in front of our house, and she had the child by the hand and dragging the child and walking and dragging the child and walking. And all of a sudden, she's coming to my front door up the sidewalk. And I went and said, I went out, I was watching from the window, and I went out and asked her, can I help you? And she said, yes, we are homeless and we're looking for help. And I shared with her that I could not help her by myself without calling the police department because they knew where to take you and how to get the help for you. And she took off. She did not wait for me to give her a phone number or call or anything. And I immediately called the police department, and they said that they would look into it, especially when a child is involved. So going forward, what is Wenatchee, to include Chelan County, doing on the state of homelessness that continues to worsen? Currently, we have about 500 people that are homeless in this area, and it is estimated the population is largely male, being of 70% of homeless people. The National Alliance is working to end homelessness. It is a non-participant organization committed to ending and preventing homelessness in the United States of America. Back in the 1980s, Wenatchee made the headlines on Make a Difference Day when Betsy Tontini and her sister pulled a group of people together to do great things in this valley. We, Wenatchee, made the headlines in the paper all across the United States. Make a Difference Day, United States, USA, Wenatchee, Washington. Look it up. You'll find all the history.
We
on it.
remember
It's
that.
great.
Yeah.
And so can we do that again with policies in place, all working together to end homelessness in the USA? My daughter shared with me about a homeless man sitting out front of Office Depot, and she continued to feed him and continued to feed him. And one day I said, can I help? We pulled furniture together for him and food together, and with his help of who he was, where he was from, found him an apartment to live in, and he is now off the street. There are other people that are out there trying to do this, but we would like a policy set in place so that we know what can currently be done, not to any longer be a problem to Wenatchee, Washington. So can we end the homelessness in America? Let's make Wenatchee great again. Thank you.
Thanks, Doreen. I would comment to all of those, but the comment would be a really long, because this is a very complicated issue, not only in our city, but in our region and in our state and our country. So there's lots of things that we're doing. You don't see them all
No.
because you don't. And there's certain things that we just can't do legally because the Ninth Circuit Court has told us that there's certain things we can't do with homeless people, like remove them off the street and do things like that. So,
We
but I will,
cannot do that. Can we not put an ordinance in place?
nope. Your federal laws trump our local ordinances, so no, we could not. So we cannot remove someone from a street. We
So
can't
then we
remove
need
somebody
to-
from a park if it's during
Okay.
park hours.
So then we need to go to Washington DC and make it put in place.
Well, but we can do stuff. I'm not saying that there's not stuff we can do. We can do better, and we're going to try to do better. But you and I should sit down and talk and make an
Okay.
appointment to come see me,
I would
and
like
we'll
to
figure
do
out a
that.
way, because we can do better, and we know that.
Well, now I called
As a
your-
society, we can do better.
Yes, I called your office and told of an app that was found on a teacher's phone
Mm-hmm.
as to the Seattle kicking their homeless people out,
Oh, yeah.
and they were invited to come here and set the tent up in Washington Park.
Yeah.
And I
And
found
that was
out-
not right, so that
No,
was.
and
yeah.
I'm realizing that because the police were on top of it right away.
Yep.
So,
And Moses Lake sends them here too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Confluence Health has a MU1 clinic which can deal with some of the mental illness stuff. And so Moses Lake doesn't have that, so they put them on a bus, send them here. It's just, there's a lot to it. But
Well-
come find me and let's talk.
I would like that very much.
Great.
because
Thanks for coming tonight.
I would like to see us get to be on the map again of making a difference.
Perfect.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members.
Thanks, Doreen. Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for listening.
Anybody else wish to address the council on something that's not on this evening's agenda? Seeing no other takers, we have a number of presentations tonight. The first being our City of Wenatchee Service Award recognition. So Carrie is our Human Resources Director. We got some people that have been with us for quite a few years working for us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, council members. I have the honor of recognizing our employees who have been with us milestone years. I have 4 individuals for you tonight that was presented in your packet. 2 of those individuals are not here. Got the bug running around. So we're going to make arrangements for proper recognition with the mayor another time. But here with us this evening, we have Charlotte Mitchell. She's the Capital Projects Manager for the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Services Department, and she has achieved 5 years
on up, Charlotte.
with the city.
Oh, sure, who's taking it? Here. Hold everything there. There you are. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you for climbing Saddle Rock and making good mud on your shoes.
Thank you.
It's not working.
So to Charlotte and this next individual that we'll be recognizing, we, on behalf of the City of Wenatchee, would like to express our sincere gratitude for their dedication and many contributions to success of the city. Our next individual is Officer Gary Geiger, and he has been with the City of Wenatchee for 20 years with the police department.
Ooh. Thank you. On Facebook in 2 minutes.
Wow. A hunk of ice.
And we want to recognize Gary's family who drove in from out of town to be here to support him.
Oh.
So, and just for the record, other mentionables, Stacy Mead, she's a record specialist with the police department and she has achieved 25 years. And Tammy Patterson, also a record specialist and lead for the records division, she has achieved 35 years with the city.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. And 35 years isn't the longest tenured employee that we have, as we learned the other day at the employee breakfast. All right, next is a proclamation regarding we got a volunteer appreciation presentation. Who's gonna, is Carol Morrell here? Who's doing that? So we're doing our volunteer appreciation presentation. Come on up. So I've got this thing for Bridget Barker. Where's Bridget at? Thank you for volunteering out of the Parks Department all the time.
Oh, I'm nervous.
Hold on.
Bridget has volunteered for us for over 3 years, every week. She comes out to the park office on Monday.
Every Monday.
Every Monday.
I know how to hold them.
She does dirty job for us.
Well, thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you for volunteering in the city and.
You should put her on the payroll.
All right.
We don't have Monday for Small Business Saturday.
All right, now we have our Small Business Saturday proclamation. Who has that?
I have that, Your Honor.
Councilmember Bailey.
Whereas the City of Wenatchee, Washington celebrates our local small businesses and contributions they make to our local economy and community, according to the United States Small Business Administration, there are currently 30.2 million small businesses in the United States. They represent 99.7% of all businesses with employees in the United States and are responsible for 65.9% of net new jobs created from 2000 to 2017. And whereas small businesses employ 47.5% of the employees in the private sector in the United States, and whereas 90% of consumers in the United States say Small Business Saturday has had a positive impact on their community, and whereas 89% of consumers who are aware of Small Business Saturday said the day encourages them to shop small all year long, and whereas 73% of consumers who reportedly shop small at independently owned retailers and restaurants on Small Business Saturday did so with friends and family. And whereas the most reported reason for consumers aware of the day to shop and dine at small independently owned businesses was to support their community. And whereas Wenatchee, Washington supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities. And whereas advocacy groups as well as public and private organizations across the country have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Now therefore I, Frank J. Kuntz, Mayor of the City of Wenatchee, Washington, do hereby proclaim November 30th, 2019 as Small Business Saturday and urge the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. In witness whereof, I have caused the seal of the City of Wenatchee to be affixed on this 30th day of November 2019. Frank J. Kuntz, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Bailey. Is Linda Haglund here,
Where's
right,
Linda
Lund, from
tonight?
downtown? She's usually here.
She is, so I think Tuesday night, perhaps you
Okay.
guys
Oh,
can
okay.
deliver that to
Yeah,
her.
because we're
Yep.
having Tuesday night dinner with
Dinner
her.
with her,
Yep,
right.
perfect. Okay, we'll make sure she gets it then. Thank you, Councilmember Bailey.
You're welcome.
All right, we have a number of action items. If your calendar says the museum is coming, they're not coming tonight. The executive director had a family issue to deal with, so we'll pick that up a different time. So we have a number of action items this evening, and we have a number of public hearing items. So we'll start with our first action item, which is regarding the housing for indigent persons, Glenn DeVries.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Glenn DeVries, Community Development Director. If you recall, recently the council approved funding for a program for severe weather shelters in East Wenatchee and Wenatchee through that came through the Chelan-Douglas Local Homeless Housing Task Force. And in order to be able to do those severe weather shelters, there's an exemption that's provided under the law for the building code, and it doesn't make it so that life safety issues aren't addressed. They still have to be provided for, but it does provide some exemptions that are necessary in order to provide for this option in communities. The City of Wenatchee is doing the same process. For example, it still requires that the shelter be in an area that's has sprinkler systems so that life safety is maintained, things of that nature. It does provide that there would be a 5-year period that shelter would be authorized for after it's reviewed, and there'd be a review process of the site where the building official inspects it. The time period for the exemption for temporary shelter would be for a period of not more than 90 consecutive days, but it allows for it in the winter and also in the summer, so for a total of 180 days. So again, you had provided an approval for the funding for this. This is a necessary component under the building code, and have this as a recommendation of approval before you for your consideration. Would stand for any questions that you might have.
I don't have any questions, so any questions from the council? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I'll move for City Council to adopt ordinance number 2019-43, allowing emergency exemptions for housing for indigent persons, providing for severe ability, and fixing a time when the same shall become effective.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Harold, second by Councilmember Markart to adopt ordinance 2019-43, allowing emergency exemptions for housing of indigent persons, providing for severability, and fixing a time when the ordinance shall become effective. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you.
Are you doing the code enforcement board?
I am, yes.
All right. Next item.
So we have 3 members on the Code Enforcement Board whose terms have expired, and all 3 members are willing to apply again for continued service on that board. Emilka Firmacek, Don Files, and Adriana Farnsworth, and we're very appreciative that they're willing to continue that service, and would forward to you for your consideration and recommend that you reappoint them.
Your Honor, I make a motion that we adopt resolution number 2019-44, appointing members to the Wenatchee Code Enforcement Board for 2-year terms.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Kulas, second by Councilmember Huffaker to adopt resolution 2019-44, appointing members to the Wenatchee Code Enforcement Board for a 2-year term, that being Emilka Furmanchik, Don Files, and Adriana Farnsworth. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is our strategic communication plan and policy. Allison.
Good evening, Allison Williams, Executive Services Director. So Resolution 2019-48 would adopt a strategic communications plan and policy. We as a city have been working for since 2015, centralizing public information, focusing on the bilingual and bicultural outreach that we've been doing. And as a part of the work of the Deputy Clerk Public Information Officer this year, this was on the work plan. She has been happily on maternity leave. And so as a part of Dale Cantrell's business continuity plan, this did need to get put into place. And so what we have for you is a framework that has been developed that we would ask for your adoption of, with the knowledge that it will be further refined when Anna is back, and she'll take it through a process with each of the departments. But we think it gives us a great starting place to formalize those processes. I would ask for any questions. Or
Any questions of Allison? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I will move for City Council to approve resolution number 2019-48, adopting a City of Wenatchee strategic communications plan and policy.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Harold, second by Councilmember Markart to approve resolution 2019-48, adopting a City of Wenatchee strategic communication plan and policy. Discussion?
Just a comment. This is very well done. It's very thorough.
there's some great examples out there. So.
Oh, are you saying that you didn't start this from scratch?
Well, it's always good to see what is
How
out
those
there
together.
and
Okay.
working. So yes,
Excellent.
adapted for our use.
Perfect. All right, any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Extension of a franchise agreement with Cascade Natural Gas. Allison?
Yes, and I would introduce Stephen Kessie as here. He's the Region 1 Director for Cascade Natural Gas. He very nicely emailed and let us know that our franchise with Cascade Natural Gas had lapsed. And so both entities would ask for this extension to allow us to work together on the negotiation of a new franchise. So Resolution 2019-49 would provide for that. We would ask for your approval, and Stephen is here if you have any questions. And
We're just continuing the current terms until such time as we get into agreement?
yes.
Perfect. Any questions for Allison? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I make a motion for City Council to approve resolution number 2019-49, granting an extension of the term of the franchise agreement with Cascade Natural Gas to December 31st, 2020.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Huffaker, second by Councilmember Bailey, to approve Resolution 2019-49, granting an extension of the term of the franchise agreement with Cascade Natural Gas to December 31st, 2020. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Legislative agenda. Allison, are you doing that? Jim?
I'm passing out the a freshened up version. We had a meeting with our legislators today and considered some additional language. But we did not add that, but we did add the remainder of the language on the Basic Law Enforcement Academy. So it's a little beefed up from the version that is in your packet. So Jim, would you like to proceed with this?
Yeah, I just don't really have much to add more than what I said, I guess, the last time when we introduced this, but just it's kind of the first time, at least in my tenure on the council that we've had a formal legislative agenda. I think it adds to the strength if cities support the AWC legislative agenda, which is at the top there. Formally doing that, I think, gives them more strength as they negotiate. In addition to that, the items down below are more specific to our needs as a city, which virtually all of those touch other cities as well. But again, this gives our legislators a formal document to know how we feel about these particular issues and how we would like them to proceed to seek resolution to them. So that's really, I guess, all I would need to say about that. But at any rate, it's you have any questions on it? I think we met today with two of our 12th district legislators and had a good exchange. So they were happy to have this in hand. So.
Yeah, and I think it's nice. We took the AWC priorities and put them first, and then put the ones that are local to us after that. So I think it's a very complete document in terms of, I'm sure things will change once they get in session. They always do, but I think having this adopted sends the message that these are our priorities are. All right. Any questions for Jim or Allison? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Well, Your Honor, make a motion for the City Council to approve Resolution 2019-51, endorsing the legislative priorities adopted by the Association of Washington Cities and identifying the City of Wenatchee legislative priorities.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Bailey, second by Councilmember Markart to approve Resolution 2019-51, endorsing the legislative priorities adopted by the Association of Washington Cities and identifying the City of Wenatchee legislative priorities. Discussion?
Your Honor, just one point to make. Both two members of our council have served on the AWC's legislative committee, and that Councilman Mark Kulas and Councilman
Markart?
Markart, there we go. Lyle Markart.
Right. So we've got a motion, we got a second, discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Allison. Thanks, Jim.
Did you get the wrong button?
I was like a...
Red one instead of the mute one.
See if this works. Maybe she ended up in a dead spot.
Or she was trying to mute her phone.
Yeah.
You there, Ruth?
Yeah, I am. That's exactly what happened. I am sorry.
That's all right.
Been there, done that.
Yep. All right, so next item is our 2019 budget amendment. Brad Posenjak, Finance Director.
Good evening. A year ago, the council adopted the 2019 budget, and as what happens from time to time, we need budget amendments. We adopt our budget, I'm proud to say, very, very tightly. And so in a city that is as dynamic and creative as ours, things pop up from time to time throughout the year, and we need to make budget adjustments so that we can stay legally compliant with the state requirements on us. So I've got a list of budget amendments that have all been reviewed by a finance committee, and here asking that the council would approve these budget amendments as listed in Exhibit A. And I'm here if you have any questions.
And as I mentioned, that not all of these are cash spends. Some of these are just sort of bookkeeping entries.
Yes.
Like the Kenzie's Landing property donation, that wasn't a cash thing. And so not all of this is money that was spent in excess of the original budget. But you still need the authority and the accounts to make it happen.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Any questions for Brad? The Finance Committee approved it today. So if you don't have any questions, I'd entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion for City Council to adopt ordinance number 2019-38, amending the 2019 budget as adopted by ordinance number 2018-41, as amended by ordinance number 2019-27, revoking, recalling, or decreasing all
all or a portion of total appropriation provided for, entering findings that this ordinance is in the best interest of the city and approved by a majority +1 of the entire city council.
Second.
A motion by Councilmember Markart, second by Councilmember Harold, to adopt ordinance 2019-38, amending the 2019 budget as adopted by ordinance 2018-41 and as amended by ordinance 2019-27, revoking, recalling, or decreasing all or a portion of total appropriations provided for, entering finding that this ordinance is in the best interest of the city and approved by a majority +1 of the entire council. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. For the record, 7 in favor, 0 against. Temporary lending of cash. Brad.
Each year, we come to the council and ask for this resolution to be done. It is for when we have multiple funds at the city, and sometimes the nature of certain funds is they have to spend money first before they get reimbursement in grant revenues or other sources. And so in those temporary times where they have to spend money first, sometimes their cash balance will go negative. And in those times, the general fund is perfectly legal to loan that money to those other funds. The auditors just want to see that the council is aware that that's happening and has approved the authority to loan from the general fund to these other funds. And so this is pretty much an administrative resolution that I'm asking you to adopt tonight.
Your Honor, I make a motion for the City Council to approve the resolution number 2019-46, approving the temporary lending of cash from the general fund to other funds, including but not limited to the CDBG Entitlement Fund and the Police Station Go Bond Fund as needed in 2020.
We got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Huffaker, second by Councilmember Kulas to approve resolution 2019-46, approving the temporary lending of cash from the general fund to other funds, including but not limited to the CDBG Entitlement Fund and the Police Station General Obligation Bond Fund as needed in 2020. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
All right, we have a number of public hearings tonight. It looks like we have 5 of them. So the process for a public hearing is we will first hear from staff. We will ask questions of staff, then we'll turn over to any members of the audience that wish to address the council on that public hearing item. And then we'll turn over to the council for any action they may take after hearing from the public. The first item tonight, which is our item H, is a development agreement between Triad, Beaconsfield, and the Clennon family. So Glenn, are you presenting tonight? I am, yeah.
Okay. Good evening again. The city received an application for a development agreement submitted by the Triad and Beaconsfield groups for a piece of property, and I don't see the clerk here to bring up the map. I'm sorry.
Oh, Tim can.
Tim, do you have the ability to bring up the map of the property for this component? And it's in your packets. Hopefully you have it before you. So this is areas to the west of the irrigation canals in the Beaconsfield, the orchard areas and hillsides. This is in a portion of the site, not the entirety of the area. The city's been in discussions with Triad Development Group, and they've done a pre-application meeting and subsequent meetings looking at master planning this area. One of the things that the development group is looking at, they wanted to do a multi-family component on the site on the more southern portion of the properties. Since that time, the city has adopted a new housing code update. This update would not allow for the multifamily development in that location. The development group would like to provide for the vested ability to apply for that. It would need to go through a hearing examiner process and meet that criteria. And so they provided a development agreement submittal for the council to consider that opportunity. The area that is designated is, as far as the zoning, is residential single family under the adopted codes that were just adopted by the council. That does allow for clustering, cottage housing, duplexes, single family homes. The residential low doesn't do outright multifamily, although it does allow for townhomes and courtyard multifamily units. So the applicant is looking for that flexibility. Their proposal is that in the area on the map, that they would either be able to apply for a plan development for the whole area, or maybe it's just a portion of the area, and then they're allowed to work within that area for this as many phases as they'd like, but to get it started within an 8-year period. The staff and legal counsel have reviewed the development agreement with respect to process and consistency with code and state law, and find that it is consistent with our codes and statutory provisions. We have not weighed into the merits of the proposal. The applicant's representatives are here this evening to provide a presentation on their proposal and why they believe that it's appropriate to adopt, and are certainly here for those questions. But staff is here now or at any point during these proceedings to answer any questions, as well as legal counsel on what we have reviewed as well, and would stand for any questions you have. But certainly the applicant will be going into more detail on the whys that they are applying for it. Oh, great. And so here you can see the area that is proposed is to the southern portion of the Beaconsfield properties owned by the Clennons and on contract with the Triad Development Group. Here's the irrigation canal. Maple Street comes in. Where does Maple come in? Would be extended somewhere through this area. But they're looking in this portion quadrant of the site. And again, if they may apply for the whole area for plan development or just a portion, the area that they don't apply for, the way the development agreement is set up, they would then apply and use the current code for what's not in a plan development. Ultimately, they're looking for the flexibility for choices in their proposal as far as how it's drafted.
So can you answer a little bit about why the Planning Commission chose what they did for the current housing codes that don't allow multifamilies in that area?
Sure. The Planning Commission, when they were looking at the different zoning designations, the land use designations, were looking at compatibility issues. They were looking specifically when they looked at the residential single family, it's the lowest density district. And I think one of the primary factors was topography, foothills characteristics. And so they believe doing a sort of a tiered approach in that area was appropriate. I think the biggest thing that they discussed was topography, a concern on the massing of, say, townhomes or multifamily placed on the top of hillsides and how that would blend in and visually from the foothills and, looking up to the foothills. And I think that was their concern. I think the applicant's representative did come to the Planning Commission and talked about how in this circumstance the housing would be more along the base versus on top of a hillside. The Planning Commission's concern was, though, that they made decisions based on the area, all zoning districts and all the areas that are encompassed in a residential single family, not just a particular site-specific location. And so they did feel it was appropriate to make those recommendations to the council on that district. Does that answer your question on?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Does staff have any comment? I understand the land use part of it, I think, to the extent that I understand anything. The 8-year time frame, is that something staff's okay with? Seems like a long time for me.
It I think in discussions with staff and the city family as a whole, I think, a 6-year timeframe seems a little more comfortable for staff. I mean, we work with anything, but 6-year timeframe seems a little more appropriate.
So if we wanted to change the time frame from 8 to 6, we could do that when we
Absolutely.
make the motion. Okay.
Is the 6 year, is that kind of typical, more typical of what we have done in the past or and are currently doing? Or is it all over the place?
It seems to align a lot with other development processes that we do. We haven't done a whole lot of development agreements here. So, you certainly have the discretion to do 8. It just seems to fall in line more with other development types or processes, but so
The Widener one we did was 36 months, but that's a piece of property that's already sitting there that doesn't require
Yeah.
to be utilitized or roads built. And
Right.
so obviously, I think 36 months it would be not near enough.
Yeah,
And the
right.
issue
That
is,
would
is
be
8 years the
unreasonable.
right number or not? I mean, we're trying to create development and get things to happen, and if our goal is to get things built quickly and we're willing to look at this from a land use perspective, should we tighten that down a little bit? But that's sort of your guys' decision if we get there.
If I recall it, right, a subdivision plat now has just a plat. It's 5 years
correct, yes.
itself, plus 1 or 2 potential, I can't remember.
Depending on whether you adopt an extension provision.
So as I read, I just want to make sure that I was looking for something when we were initially talking about this agreement. I was looking for something that would take me a couple days to read, and I was very pleasantly surprised that it was 13 items, and really, I'm honing in on item number 3, vesting. That really is the essence of the agreement. The other stuff seems to be more of a formality. I might be mistaken, but it's just vesting, and so there's no approval of any development concept, no
Correct.
approval of utility extensions. All that occurs through the normal quasi-judicial process.
Correct.
We're just really dealing with a vesting timeframe here and the allowance to develop this larger piece of property incrementally or in phases or not.
So they could,
Is it just so simple that I'm missing something?
it's a non-project action, so it's not project specific, and it does essentially allows them the ability to apply under a planned residential development process for the whole area depicted that's hatched or a portion of it. They do a portion, then they can't do any in the remainder. But for the area that they do apply for, they could do phasing and set it up that way. And the way the agreement's set up is if they start it within the 6 years, then they have time to develop and redevelop within it, subject to the timeframes that we have in our code already, for platting phases, things of that nature. So it would have to be, it would be subject to consistency review with code and state law, and have to show that they meet, for example, our planned residential development process talks about character consistency and how it fits in within the area and public benefit. And so it'd have to meet all those standards and be subject to public review and ultimately hearing examiner review.
So we're not, the council would not be granting any development rights that do not presently exist outside of the system that we have.
Correct.
Yeah, we're not approving a development. We're looking at a development agreement.
Yeah.
Correct.
But I think what we're doing tonight, just to be clear, is we're saying that it's okay to use the previous rules that we had set up in place prior to last week to allow them to go forward with this development based on the previous rules, but the current rules as they stand today wouldn't allow multi-use families in there.
We still allow planned developments, do we not, even under the new code?
We do not.
We did dump that entirely.
Correct.
That's what's at stake here tonight, really.
But the current,
Well, okay, call it a planned development or call it a master plan, right? I mean,
yeah,
isn't that, I guess that's what I'm feeling that what we're talking about here is a master planning process. I don't like the term planned development anyway. Everyone thinks it's a PUD and we get that confused with the utility provider, but it's the ability to do a master plan.
And that's sort of what, they from the beginning of the year, they had a master plan concept and not fully developed, certainly, but one of the components was multifamily. as that master plan concept from the beginning of this year. And so they can certainly speak to it this evening, but that was their concern in getting this in, to retain that ability for what they originally, started discussing in the beginning.
All right, why don't we go ahead and hear from the audience, because I think the applicant would like to discuss a few things with us, and then if we have more questions for Glenn, we can certainly do that. So we'll let the applicant come up and speak to the council. I see their attorney is here.
Good evening, council. Mayor Kuntz. My name's Pete Fraley, 1 Street, Wenatchee. Represent Triad Maple, one of the applicants in this development agreement. Don Mounter is also here on behalf of Triad Maple, and Mr. Clinton is here as well, should any questions of him be necessary with regard to this proposal. Staff has done a great job in presenting it. Great questions thus far with regard to the impact on the development agreement. But first, some background, some context. As alluded to, the Triad has been working very closely with city staff over the last year on looking at all aspects of this development. The goal is to hit all market segments, a varied community from a residential planning standpoint. One of the complexities associated with this particular project, of course, is the various access points and traffic circulation. So, whether it's Maiden Lane, the extension of Maple, or the orientation for the future Springwater, all those things have been on the table and have been discussed with the applicant. Throughout this last year, including the efforts taken to annex the property into the city of Wenatchee in April, but throughout this last year, we have always been working under the presumption that the planned development vehicle was going to be the vehicle that would be used for purposes of this development. And, big projects, lots happen, and you can't predict things. But a few wrinkles were thrown at us here in the last few months. Of course, you're fully aware of the litigation regarding mule deer habitat, and we're following that closely to make sure what the outcome of that we take that into consideration as we move forward. Then ecology raised its head with regard to historical orchard properties, and we're working with ecology, and we're trying to identify a pathway through that particular dynamic as well. Bottom line is, we anticipated an application by September or October of this year that would have been vested, and we would have been vested under the planned development code that you have right now. But in the meantime, staff and the Planning Commission have done a lot of hard work at looking at a new housing code. And quite frankly, Triad likes the new housing code. It just has one component that we are planning on that's no longer allowed. And so we tried to look at this from the standpoint of how do we make this as narrow as possible, okay, to address just that one component of this overall master plan, okay, hitting all the market segments in the residential community. So the things that I'd like to bring to your attention, and it was alluded to by Glenn in his presentation, but it's a one-time opportunity. Okay? We can't submit multiple applications for a plan development. It's one time. It's also for a portion of the property. It's not for the entire property. And quite frankly, when you look at the proposals that have been circulated and viewed by city staff, the multifamily potential condominium component is set into the hillside, not up on top of the hills. Mr. Graham, on behalf of Triad Maple, is, he graduated from high school here. He understands Wenatchee, and he understands those concerns and does not want to make an offensive statement on the foothills of the Wenatchee Valley. So, so it's a one-time opportunity, okay? It's for a smaller piece of the overall plan development. And like I was saying, trying to say at least, is that it'll actually be a small portion of even the crosshatch property, okay? It's not going to be for the entire crosshatch property in the end. The other thing that I'd like to really bring to your attention, and it was discussed in the exchange that you've already had with staff, is this doesn't grant any development rights. Okay, this doesn't say you can do exactly what we're thinking we're going to do. It has to go through full review. SEPA, public comment, hearing before the hearing examiner, everything's on the table in terms of what concerns may be expressed with that sort of development. So I want to make that very clear, is it's just preserving a process. And then the full process has to unfold in order to get to an outcome. The difference between 6 and 8 years was one of the questions that came up. This is a big project. We're talking about hundreds of units over the entire development period of the Clannon property. And so, it's 8 years may seem like a long time, but in the development world and the delays we've already experienced and just some hiccups and unanticipated agency actions, it takes time for good projects to unfold. And so, if the whole approval hinges on 6 to 8 years, we will accept 6, but we're requesting 8. So I hope that helps set some context on why we're seeking this development agreement. We feel it's very narrow, very specific, not asking for a lot. It's just preservation of a process. Be happy to.
Any questions for Mr. Fraley while we have him here? I think that sort of echoed what Mark was saying in terms it's just a vesting sort of issue.
And that would be because the amendments we just passed do not come into, they don't come into effect until sometime in December.
About 10 days, I think.
So that's why we're allowed to do this, because, okay. No, all right.
Correct.
We would be allowed if we.
And it'll be the last planned development that will ever occur in Wenatchee.
Because in essence, the stuff that we passed last time has a 30-day before it becomes law. So this is the window between when we adopted it and when it officially becomes law. Is that correct? Thank you.
Okay. I'm getting it now.
All right, any questions for Peter?
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anybody else from the audience? Come on up, Bart.
Name and address. I'm Bart Clennon, live on Maple Street and part of the development. And I want to make it clear that I have not been a part of the detailed discussions that have taken place. But what I want to assure you is that we would not be proceeding with this group that we're proceeding with if we didn't have huge confidence that we're going to be able to look at what happens there 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now and feel good about what's there. Fred Grimm was a Wenatchee high school graduate, went to school with a couple of my wife's brothers and sisters, and we've known him for a long time. He's done a lot of stuff in California, and everything I've heard about him is very, very positive. I haven't flown down there and walked through all the stuff he's done, but all I want to, and this shouldn't help you vote, I don't think really, but I just want to tell you that we would not be doing this if we weren't working with someone that we felt cares about what we end up with. It isn't just a financial thing that you turn in 12 days. And the other thing, this big, there's almost 200 acres involved. And I don't know, they can express the units, but there's, hundreds of units, 400 or 500 units involved. That takes time, just the time that it takes to sell. You can't put them all on the market in one day. You've got to go through a planned process and so on. So all I want to do is assure you that we care about what's taking place there. Obviously, once we sign the papers with them, the ultimate papers with them, we're out of it. But we wouldn't be having the conversations with them if we didn't feel good about who we're dealing with. Thank you.
Thanks, Bart.
Unless you have questions.
Any questions for Bart?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to address the council on this public hearing item regarding the development agreement with Triad? See no other takers. Turn it over to the council. Do we want to start with a motion and then have discussion? How do you guys want to handle this? That would be the more appropriate way if we had one.
I'd like to make a motion for the city council to approve resolution number 2019-47, approving a development agreement between the city of Wenatchee, Triad Maple, LLC, Beaconsfield Associates 2 LLP, and Barton Clennon and Sheila Clennon.
Second?
Motion by Councilmember Markart, second by Councilmember Kulas to approve Resolution 2019-47, approving a development agreement between the City of Wenatchee, Triad Maple LLC, Beaconsfield Associates 2 LLP, and Bart and Sheila Clennon. Discussion. Council members.
When did we find out about the ecology, about the soil thing? We were surprised by it. Correct?
So probably some 60 days ago.
60 days ago.
Yeah.
And this group came to you, to the city in January? I'm just curious, trying to get time frame. Beginning of this year?
Yeah.
Good year.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that long because the annexation happened in April or May, so it was probably February or March. Yeah, something like that, I would say. Yeah.
So
Because it took us a while to get the annexation done and then,
end of April.
yeah.
The,
Yeah.
January.
Yeah.
And the latest on the soils is ecology is establishing a work group to go through those issues, and they last communique was they agreed to go back to their previous stance, which was more of an alert, an advisory as opposed to something more action oriented. Okay. So it doesn't mean that something's going to come down the track.
So if I was developing, I'd hurry up and fast.
Yeah. I guess the question comes up on the period, the period of time for the agreement.
Right.
Whether it be 2027 or 2025. And I'm just curious as to what other thoughts were on that.
How many acres is it?
175?
175 acres. How many homes, residents?
Could be as many as 500 units.
Maybe 500.
But how many are affected by this agreement that we're looking at tonight?
Yeah. So that sort of,
It's a much smaller area.
Yeah, that sort of gets to the issue, which is what's the right amount of time for, to allow vesting to work its way through a hearing process with a hearing examiner and SEPA and all those things. Obviously, the longer the time frame, the more time they have to sort of work their way through it. We're sort of excited to get housing built yesterday, yet, at some point in time, we've got to sort of figure out, do we want to push them? I look at this differently than the Widener deal in that the Widener deal, it's a piece of property sitting there, it's utilitized, it's ready to go. This is obviously going to take a lot of time. So I'm less concerned. I mean, I like 6 better than 8, but to me, it's not a difference as to whether I would approve it or not approve it. I'm sort of asked the question.
I'm not concerned about the time frame at all. I don't have a problem with that.
I guess I'm not, really not either, knowing how economic cycles work in the development and housing industry.
You mean it's not going to be going up forever?
Well, the last little blip we had, we're very thankful that our agricultural industry has remained strong because that got us through some pretty tough times in other markets, and that could happen. Well, it's cyclical. The housing market, the development market is cyclical. That's the best way to describe it.
Any other comments? Are we ready for a question?
So,
I have a comment.
Yes, Ruth?
go ahead, Ruth.
I'm sitting here kind of scratching my head on this agenda item because, I understand we need housing and, I'm all for that and I'm all for doing what we can to advance, the cause for more affordable housing. But I'm struggling here with the way the agreement is written because I just find it that it's too vague. I mean, we sit here and talk about it, but in writing, we don't have, details. And I'm struggling with that because, as a lawyer, we all know that the devil's in the details. And I don't know what it looks like. I know we talked about, the foot of the foothills, but I don't know what we're talking about in regards to the numbers in the family housing that would be built. I just, like Mark said earlier, it's too simplistic for me. It's just, I'm really struggling with this because I wasn't provided more information, or at least an agreement that would be more detailed. And I know I heard that this is just, to preserve a process, and I get that, but I'm also concerned that if we agree to this, to preserve the process, and then later on we're not agreeing as to the details, it's just going to open up, for potential liability for the city.
So
that's where I'm sitting on this.
Ruth, what I would say is that when you think of all of the developments and we've done a bunch of them over the last 8 years, almost every one of them ends up in front of the hearing examiner, who determines whether or not the development meets the legal standards set by the city, both in terms of zoning and in terms of providing utilities and roads and traffic and all of those sorts of things. And that's the way we've done it around here for a long, long time. And that same process would happen with these parcels. It will go through a hearing examiner process, full public. They'll be doing all of the stuff that everyone has to do. And so I think the agreement is vague in the sense that it can't tell you whether it's going to be 112 apartments and they're going to be blue and red, or they're going to be 32 apartments and they're going to be red and green. It just basically says we want the right to go in front of a hearing examiner and do a plan development. And I trust the hearing examiner process and the process of SEPA and everything else to come up with the conclusion, with full public comment, by the way, to come up with an answer that works and fits our code. So I have to trust that as the process we've used ever since I've been mayor and long before that. So I understand the vagueness of it, but it's also, there's a process there to take place.
And if I might, here's part of my concern with that, is that the Planning Commission and our city staff spent a lot of time coming up with what we thought was the best housing code to move forward for the best of our valley, to try and fill in housing, a little more density in areas where it made sense. But they determined that this area probably shouldn't have multifamily housing in there. So now you're, in the future, going to ask our hearing examiner to look at a different set of rules at that time than he would for everybody else that might be right next to it.
Yep.
And one of the concerns I have is, in the past, we haven't done a real good job of making sure new developments fit in neighborhoods. And I think this just opens that can of worms up to cause some future problems with the neighbors that already live in that area. That's my concern with it.
That was exactly what I was going to say. I would agree with you, Frank. But the problem is that we already went through the process through the Planning Commission, and they determined exactly that this is more for residential low and single family, and not for multifamily housing.
And I guess when push comes to shove, what's the problem of having them go ahead with a development but not use multifamily housing? Just go ahead with development of single family use. They probably don't get as dense as multifamily would, but we already have some access problems in that area that I think would just get worse with multifamily. So for those kind of reasons, I'm leaning towards, I think we should do what the Planning Commission came up with, and so I'm kind of opposed to the agreement.
I am too.
Anybody else wish to talk before we vote?
Well, let me weigh in here. I've had some concerns with it, similar concerns in terms of the work that has been done by the Planning Commission and moving us to, to this new set of rules that we voted on last week. I guess where I have got the conflict is that, again, like Councilman Kulas said, we're looking at a fairly small document here. Basically, a very, very overview, kind of look at this process as opposed to getting down in the weeds. And I tend to be a weeds guy. And in earlier conversations, but I guess for me, the thing that's really critical, and Ruth brought it up, is so when we use the term multifamily, that can cover everything from, a duplex to, something like Riverside 9. And I guess where I need the assurance is that what we're talking about is that in both the current, the new code that we're operating under and the old code, that there is sufficient guidelines to make sure that we do not get a development that would turn out to look something like the Issaquah Highlands, where you have just rabbit hutches crammed close together and stacked on top of each other across the skyline in every available space. So that's my concern, is that I'm not opposed to multifamily in and of itself. I think there are ways to do that. I guess where I need some assurance is that we end up with the appropriateness, and again, that's a very vague term. Maybe Glenn, you're the one to probably answer this. When we talk about appropriateness, who makes the decision about what's appropriate and what's not?
Based on the codes in place today for plan development and a review of consistency of the comprehensive plan and the process.
Can you grab the mic so Ruth can hear you, please?
Thank you. I'll go up to that. So, for example, we had a development off of 5th, directly adjacent to the canal that was Gary Noy's proposal. Same type of concept. It would be reviewed with the performance and standards of the plan development process as far as how that is compatible and appropriate for that area. Talks about consistency and compatibility, not necessarily meaning that it's the same type of housing, but looking at the overall package of the development and how it blends into the area appropriately and not having an impact in the neighborhood. And those can be architectural features, open space, height, the massing and character of the structures. And so that same process we've used historically through our plan developments would still be in place if this is approved, and would have to be reviewed by staff. And we'd make a recommendation based on whether it's consistent with that criteria and consistent with the provisions of the comprehensive plan. And then that ultimately would be, and it would be subject to a public review process, and that would ultimately be decided by the City of Wenatchee hearing examiner.
Okay. All right. So basically, that matching up what they present and getting that all matched up with the codes and their standards and those kind of, that's would be done by staff.
Correct.
Okay. And then moves on to public review and then
we'd make a recommendation on it, ultimately decided by the hearing examiner.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I don't oppose this in and of itself, but there's a reason why, I think the Planning Commission said we're not going to have that, and in the new code, and yet now we're making an exception before the thing even goes into effect, kind of deal. So that bothers me a little bit, I guess. But anyway, that answers my question. Thank you.
Any questions for Glenn? I think we sort of discussed this. So are we ready to cast a vote?
One question.
Yeah, go ahead, Linda.
Were the developers aware that we were changing the planning codes?
Yeah.
They were?
I think they were aware. I think they got to it a little bit late, though. I mean, sometimes you get to these, you saw the housing code document, right?
Yeah, I
Right?
saw it.
Okay, so there's times when those things get going and you may not follow all the way to the end. And so I think they came in a little bit late to the process. And So again, it sort of is what it is at the end of the day. You got to make a decision. Do you trust staff? Do you trust the developer? Are you okay with having a hearing examiner make a decision under old code, which has been in effect for a zillion years? And are you comfortable with that process? Or are you not? And do you want to go back under what will be the new rules, which won't allow planned unit developments? And what's interesting is that from a couple of developers that I had talked to going up into this housing code, the one thing they said is, I don't like the fact that you're getting rid of planned unit developments, just because they like the ability to negotiate and come up with stuff. And I said, listen, I think we're going to get rid of them. And then if we have to bring them back at some point, as we keep looking at our code, we certainly could. But at this point, they're not in there. And so you really don't have a lot of flexibility. So what I would say is our housing code that we just in the process of changing to really did a lot of great things in terms of densities and protecting neighborhoods. It did a lot of really great things. It just happened to take this one little thing and make it so it doesn't work in this instance. And then you guys have to decide whether or not it's okay that it works in this instance. Do we trust the developer? Do we trust the planning staff and the hearing examiner process to make something that's good for our community? And I quite frankly do. I trust them to do something that's cool. One thing about planned unit developments is there has to be something that benefits the public in there. Okay, whether it's trail access, parks, there has to be something in there that benefits the public. That's why they get to do the densities that they get to do. So I'm actually okay with this. I was sort of pleased. I've never seen a Pete Fridley document that wasn't 40 pages. So to get one in 6, I was pretty impressed with that. I haven't seen that in the past. So, and that's from someone who reviews a lot of his documents. So I am personally fine with it. But again, I'm not the one that gets to vote. So.
I think also another part of it is.
I will say this, Frank. I trust staff. I trust the developers. I also trust the planning commission. Well, I guess what I don't trust is the devil's in the details. And when people are in disagreement, that's when, all hell breaks loose. And that's what I don't trust.
All right. Yes, Allison, anything else?
I was just going to say that, the request is to preserve this tool, and you're dealing with 175 acres with very difficult topography. And so this tool provides the ability to cluster, to do some things that the new code does not. And so I think as they're evaluating their development, they are trying to keep their options open to consider the landscape and be able to develop it. And so this tool provides them that. So in the future, if they wanted that clustering ability, the underlying, they would have to go through a code amendment process if they wanted to get that density.
Just a clarification that not clustering is allowed under the new code and is specifically encouraged in this area. So it's specifically the multifamily that's at issue and doing a plan development, not the clustering.
All right. So we've, discussed this for a while. So
I got a couple.
What's that?
I have a couple of questions here. When did we start working on the new code, roughly?
About the same time.
About the same time?
Yeah, we've been at that for about a year.
And how long did the old code was in place with the city of Wenatchee?
Generally speaking,
2006,
2006.
components previous or after.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you.
I tend to think that I've really been writing the fence on this, and I didn't know what direction I was going to go, but I tend to think it's the right thing to go ahead and approve it because these people have been working on this for quite a period of time. They've been delayed by things that are totally out of their control, and if they hadn't been delayed, we would have been working with the old code.
Yeah.
So it's a small exception to make.
All right. Anybody else wish to talk before we vote? All right. So I'll just restate it. So we've got a motion for the City Council to approve Resolution 2019-47, approving a development agreement between the City of Wenatchee, Triad Maple, LLC, Beaconsfield Associates, Beaconsfield Associate LLP, 2 LLP, and Barton Sheila Clinton. So that is the motion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Be a 5 yeas, 2 nays. Motion passes 5-2. It is 6:28. Let's take a little 5-minute break and we'll reconvene at 6:35. Let's go ahead and get back at it.
That's what he was partially so upset about.
Okay.
Hey,
So next item on our public hearing items would be the Chelan Douglas Homeless Housing Strategic Plan for 2019 through 2024. Is it Glenn and Brooklyn, or Glenn, or Brooklyn set it up for Glenn? What happened here? I saw Brooklyn does the work, Glenn does the talking. How does this work?
Brooklyn abandoned you?
She's here for the
CDBG.
next item.
Oh, okay.
So if you recall, we had a workshop on the Chelan Douglas Housing Strategic Plan recently. Just taking a step back, though, in 2006, the city entered into an interlocal agreement to be lead entity overseeing the development administration of the county's homeless plans for the 2-county area. And we're required to adopt a 10-year plan to reduce homelessness. That was amended as recently as 2015, but the legislature added provisions where we needed to do an update. It's actually now going to be a 5-year plan as well. We went through, as the member of the public very eloquently said tonight, I'm so glad you came, there needs to be a strategy, a policy direction in the valley to address this significant issue. And I couldn't agree more, and there's been, we have wonderful involvement in the community and regionally, a lot of very active, committed individuals on this effort, and with nonprofit agencies. And in the update of our plan, looking at these policies and priorities, we had a really good interactive process at PIBUS where we looked at existing programs and priorities. We certainly have requirements that we have to meet set by statute, but at the same time, we have had experience since 2006 working on these efforts and very active involvement and partnerships that have grown and coordination. And this result of this process is that we feel a very good plan in front of you with unanimous approval by the Chelan Douglas Task Force, which is the regional entity that oversees this program. Each jurisdiction that are partners in this process, East Wenatchee, Wenatchee, and the 2 counties, need to, at a minimum, the counties need to adopt this plan, and we should as well as part of our process for planning and partnership in this effort. So this is a state requirement that ultimately these be adopted for the homeless programs. And as I said, we went through and did a detailed review of the priorities in this previously with you. So would recommend approval of this updated plan, and would stand for any questions you might have at this time.
I don't have any questions. All right, we don't have any questions of the council. Any member of the audience wish to address the council on the adoption of the Chelan Douglas Homeless Housing Strategic Plan for 2019 through 2024? Seeing no takers, I'll turn over to the council for any action they may be willing to take.
I'll make a motion for the city council to approve resolution number 2019-50, adopting the Chelan Douglas Homeless Housing Plan 2019 to 2024.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Poyer, second by Councilmember Harold to adopt resolution 2019-50, adopting the Chelan Douglas Homeless Housing Plan for 2019 through 2024. Any discussion?
Your Honor, just one comment or question and a comment. Glenn, when we started the 10-year plan, when we start talking about 10-year plans and 5-year plans, always takes me back to my studies of Soviet Union and Communist China, and it always leads to it seemed in the way they tended to operate, and it kind of seems this is the direction that we're going. Are we making any headway? The Chinese used to do, they do a 5-year plan, and in 4.5 years in, they realized they weren't going to make the goal, so then they created a new 5-year plan. Are we seeing any definitive? In the original one, I think that didn't see it in the language in here, but in the original one, I think it was that it was going to eliminate homelessness in 10 years. We obviously haven't done that. So Do we have any metrics that give us any indication that we're making any gains, or are we still just kind of dealing with the same problem and kind of whack-a-mole kind of thing?
Bring up the chart on page 86 and you'll see that we're not.
So, a lot in there. So first of all, yes, we are making progress. I think in the beginning you had a lot of nonprofits groups, all very well-meaning and committed to addressing this issue, but doing their own, planning efforts, and there was a lot of duplication of efforts and not a strategic vision as a whole. And there was a lot of siloed approaches. And what's happened since 2006 through the good work of people like Sandra and Allison and Steve King and the nonprofits, we've brought that group together in a more coordinated fashion and efficient fashion, looking at the policies such as in this plan and looking at strategic components and goals on a yearly basis to try to move the needle. And there has been progress made. The challenges are population influx and needs continue to grow. We have a housing shortage in the community, and the biggest link to homelessness is due to your housing shortages. So the challenges are significant. We are making progress. The provisions of this plan aren't the only way we address them as a community. We've adopted an updated housing code. We're doing a variety of efforts for multifamily tax credits. We're working regionally through our Valia process. There's all sorts of provisions that we're doing as a community. We've raised the vacancy rate from 0.5% to 2%. We're extending sewer into Sunnyslope. There are variety. This can't be solved by one provision, but by increasing the housing supply, by working through these programs in a targeted manner, it all leads to a positive effect. We are placing people. We are addressing mental health issues and needs. We are trying to address crisis. We're doing outreach. A lot of it can be very frustrating looking at the crisis, the people in crisis in the community. But I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that a lot of good work is happening. We are helping people. The nonprofits in the community are being very active, and a lot of people are being helped. The challenge is the population. We have more and more bigger influx of people from outside the area, and then our own needs because of the housing crisis. And so don't lose sight of the fact that we're doing good things, but the needs continue to increase. All the more reason for having a very proactive plan and not letting it sit on the shelf, but looking and tracking. And there are very good metrics that we include in the plan. And we work actively with them as partners, monitoring and working on the contracts and improving those metrics to see how we can do and adapt. So it's an ongoing process. It can be, frustrating, but I think we continue to work on it. And I think this plan is a good step forward among the partners to continue to do that work.
Yeah, and I would say that, again, the homeless population from 2009, if you go back to the graph, is totally different, not totally different, but a lot different than the housing and the issues we have today, which is there's way more drug abuse, there's way more mental illness out there on the street, there's way more people that don't want any help, and they're coming from other places. They're coming from Moses Lake more, they're coming from the Seattle area more, and they all congregate in downtown Wenatchee. That's just where they go, and it's because we have services for them. So we are taking on a larger percentage than we would normally take for a city our size. There are great successes, and are we going to get to the old, solve homelessness? No, we're not going to get to that point. We just got to keep taking one at a time and keep trying to do what's best. And we need to get a little barrier shelter, and we're working on that, and just trying to make sure we have all of the aspects covered and just sort of do the best we can. And it's one person by one person by one person. It's difficult.
And please don't misconstrue my question. Is not a criticism of the work that's being done, because I do agree that we do provide some incredible services, and I think that's I guess what really prompted my question was that we're very good at providing a lot of very valuable services, and we do a lot of good helping a lot of people. We just don't seem to be gaining on this thing, and so that was where my question came from.
And very valid, and I think what the plan has tried to do in a much more interactive process is in the metrics that we do in the monitoring is to try to identify those gaps and have strategies to focus on those gaps through funding. And we know, for example, in the low barrier shelter that is key to helping us as a community. And so, yeah, we think it's it's not going to go away, as the mayor said, but it is.
Jim, for the last, right here.
Oh, there you go.
For the last 3.5, almost 4 years, I've been sitting on the homeless task force. Those folks have worked very, very diligently. And are we ever going to completely get rid of homelessness? No, because there are people living on the street that don't want to be in shelters or housing. They want to stay on the street. So it's really important to have those programs and outreach to them so that we can work with them and hopefully get them into shelters or get them help with mental health and get them to be productive citizens. But it's an endless task.
Yeah, well, one of the programs that I think has been a real success and is the program you have with the realtors or the rental association people. I mean that, on the surface of it, it seems counterintuitive, but it's working, and it's a really good program. It's been serving a lot of
Seems
people.
to be a win-win for both the
Yeah.
homeless and the
It is.
landlord.
Yeah.
So,
So
You take something like that and, you can only do so much brick and mortar a year, but if you can take your existing housing stock and free that up and build relationships, there's far much, more potential there. And we've been through that process, they've been able to open up a lot of housing and made progress there.
yeah, good.
All right,
Thanks.
so we do have a motion, we do have a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Now it's time for Brooklyn, CDBG Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report.
Not sorry, the title's longer than the presentation.
I thought a caper was a little pickle thing.
Okay. Good evening, Brooklyn Holton, Housing and Community Planner. Okay. So every year we receive community development block grant funding, and as part of that recipient, as us being an entitlement community, we have to provide at least 2 public hearings to go over what we're funding and intending to spend the money on and have spent the money on. So that's what this presentation tonight is to look at what we did during the 2018 CDBG program year. And during that year, we actually extended our program to adjust to align better with East Wenatchee's program and to be able to partner with East Wenatchee and the Housing Authority on an assessment of fair housing. So we had a 18-month program year. It was April 1 through September 30th of this year, which normally it would have ended in April. So we're an entitlement community. Funding fluctuates. We had a little bit more last year than we did this year, but even with the questioning of the program at a federal level, we were able to continue to see kind of a growth in our funding. We did have a consolidated plan update we've had essentially 2 of them in a 2-year period. We extended it to 2019 so that we could align our consolidated plan, which is our 5-year plan, and that will now align with East Wenatchee, and we'll be doing a new one in 2020. So you guys will be seeing some of that, I think, coming at a work session at the beginning of the year. The goals for 2018, we always prioritize preserving and improving neighborhoods. That we saw the completion of our Chelan Avenue sidewalk project. So that was a long time coming, but is finally complete, both in terms of the physical infrastructure and the funding. And then our code enforcement efforts, so we have a CDBG target area. In that area, we are able to support code enforcement salary to target and work with families on volunteer compliance. Supporting public services, we all work with the Literacy Council to help fund their operations, and they usually help over 200 individuals every year with about 170 this year being in the city of Wenatchee. And then part of that public service is to help support financially if individuals can't comply with our code requirements voluntarily and they need some financial assistance. We do have funding to help support that. And we align with the homeless plan to reduce homelessness, so we don't put direct funding from CDBG into that. But in our 2020 comp plan, we are looking at the opportunity for a regional home consortium, which would actually bring home-specific dollars into our region. So in 2018, we had just over $380,000 available. We have been receiving program income. We did a rehab loan about 10 or so years ago, and we've been receiving income from that as people are selling or wanting to refinance or rent out their home. That's one of the triggers that they have to pay it back. So we've actually, in addition to what we receive from the federal government, we are able to increase what we're able to do because of that program income. So we had about almost 100,000 coming from 2017, so we utilized that in the 2018 program year for the projects that I mentioned earlier. Of that amount, we didn't spend all of it, and what's nice is it's not a use it or lose it, so we do get to roll over that funding. So we're able to roll over almost $70,000, and we also got additional program income during the 2018 year. And again, those are the projects. And so in 2019, with the rollover funding from 2018 and then the program income, that total should say for 2018, sorry, or 2019. We have, because we're not doing a sidewalk project, we are able to support community center facility upgrades. So you guys saw an annual action plan presentation earlier this year in August that kind of went into more detail about these projects, but these are what we'll be doing in 2019. And compared to 2018 and actually previous years, the two new projects are the community center facility upgrades and supporting YMCA's Boots on the Ground program, which is a youth education program that also helps build self-confidence and teach them soft skills for communication and just social interaction. Any questions?
Nice work.
Thanks. Oh,
And I do know that the community center needs some physical improvements. I think we're working on roofing and air conditioning or stuff like that.
yep,
and-
roofing, air conditioning, and then if funding's available, I know we're looking at conversations about either helping support an upgraded kitchen if the timeline fits with that.
Right.
But there is more funding available than I think what I have heard is needed for the roofing and the air conditioning, so I think we'll be able to do a little bit more than just those two.
And I would love to figure out a way to do another sidewalk project at some point if we have to combine a couple more years. I think that was a pretty good deal that we did 2 years ago. So.
It's the fluctuation in the funding was definitely a challenge with it. I think it took about 6 years worth of funding to bring that together, but it's there's a couple options as well that I think in the 2020 consolidated plan, our consultant and I will be bringing some additional funding options that we actually haven't utilized that are available through HUD connected to CDBG. So I'm hoping that they have like different loan programs and bonding programs. So those might be able to help so that we don't have to wait that kind of long period of time if we do want to do infrastructure projects.
Great. All right. Any questions for Brooklyn? If not, I turn over to any member of the audience who wish to address the City Council regarding their consolidated annual performance and evaluation report for CDBG. Seeing no takers, I'll turn it over to the council for any action they may be willing to take.
Yeah, I'd like to make a we don't have a motion, do we?
Item J.
No,
No motion?
No motion,
No
no
motion.
action.
I just need you to do a hearing.
Okay. So check the box that says we did a public hearing.
We hear you.
Basically,
We hear you.
yes,
All right.
thank you.
Thanks, Brooklyn. All right. Next up is regarding a ordinance regarding impact fees. So Rob, and we have our consultant here and I think some members of the audience, so.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Rob Jammerman, Public Works Director. We're here tonight I'm here tonight with Kendra Bryland with, I say that correctly, with Fair and Peers, who's been our consultant since May, working with us on this project. And we're here to bring the ordinance to you tonight that would amend the Wenatchee Code from an existing impact fee that we currently have in the Broadview and expand it into the Western Foothills. Kendra is going to walk through a quick PowerPoint with you. I did want to acknowledge the help from staff and specifically Steve King for all the work that he did previously with Broadview and provided a lot of valuable history on this. So it was less painful, I think, than it could have been having Steve's help on that. So just real quick, we were before you in May. Steve and I came to you, Steve King and I came in May of this year and talked to you about potential for doing an impact fee study. You said move forward with that. In August of this year, we came back with Ms. Bryland, and she gave an overview of the impact fee, what we're referring to as the phase 1. You said, yes, we are interested in this. Please go back, study further, go to phase 2, and come back with an ordinance. And that's what we're here tonight. We did do public outreach during that time period, and so on October 10th, we met with North Central Building Council, presented the impact fees to them, gave them all the information, and asked them to send it out to their members, which they did. They did not have any major concerns or questions. They were just thankful for going through the process. And then we also hosted a public open house on October 23rd. We had over 20 people attend, ask questions about the program, and more of the questions were actually about the future of roads in the Western Foothills than it was about the impact fees. So, that brings us to tonight, and so I'm going to turn this over to Kendra, and she's going to walk through this.
Great. Well, thank you, Rob. So as Rob mentioned, this is very much a follow-up. Some of the slides you'll see are similar to kind of what I presented back in August when we were presenting the feasibility study. And tonight we're coming with a more fleshed out recommendation, which is what we understood to be our direction from you back in August. So topics that I intend to cover tonight, again, some background about transportation impact fees, Washington state law that surrounds them, some just mechanics, how these programs are structured, and then we're going to shift our focus to the Western Foothills service area and what an impact fee program might look like there. I will show kind of our kind of calculations in terms of the maximum defensible impact fee that could be supported kind of based on the assumptions of what this program would include, the amount of growth that you expect in the Western Foothills over a long 20-year period, as well as the type of infrastructure that would be needed. And then we'll end with some findings, including kind of a test run of what an impact fee application might sort of look like and how it would include credits. I will say just right off the bat, for those of you who have looked through your packet materials, you'll notice that the maximum defensible fee that is supported kind of by our calculations is a little over $24,000. We recognize that's not likely something that would be charged here. So as we went through kind of some sample calculations, we assumed a much more reasonable rate, around $7,500 per dwelling unit. So some background here. Transportation impact fees are a one-time charge on new development. They were authorized under the 1990 Growth Management Act. And that act kind of provides some parameters in terms of what impact fees can fund. They must fund projects that add capacity to the transportation system. We can't be paying for projects that are solely addressing existing deficiencies or filling potholes, and they must fund projects that are within kind of a capital facilities element. So something that's in your kind of capital plan, and we know that's something that staff is working on. State law authorizes 4 types of impact fees. We're just talking about transportation impact fees tonight, but there are other programs, schools, parks, fire infrastructure that can be charged through different mechanisms. The City of Wenatchee already has an impact-free program in place right now in the Broadview service area. That's charged on what we call an equivalent residential unit basis. Just think about that. That's roughly per single-family home. That's what an equivalent residential unit is. That program that's in place really kind of sets the foundation, and we'd be just looking to expand that program to the larger Western Foothills service area. I brought this slide before you in August just as a reminder that there are over 70 transportation impact fee programs around the state, and they're not simply within the Puget Sound or in Western Washington. On this slide here is just a sampling of communities outside of the Puget Sound, a few in Western Washington, but primarily Eastern Washington communities. What we will note is that Wenatchee's program, while it tends to be the highest Broadview out of this group, it's also a fairly unique program in that it's not citywide. It is focused on addressing infrastructure in a very localized and targeted manner, and that's kind of what this Western Foothills program would continue. Just how these programs tend to be structured. First of all, outside of the development of an impact fee program, the city performs its own kind of functional studies. That's the comprehensive plan to identify infrastructure that it wants to move forward with and that it needs over a 20-year period to accommodate growth. Within impact fee programs, then what we do is we look through kind of the programs that are within those functional studies to identify a list of eligible projects. And those are projects that really kind of match the spirit of state law. They're, in the case of an impact fee program, they're within the right-of-way of local streets and roads. They provide capacity for future growth. And then we run those projects through a series of filters to take out the cost of addressing existing deficiencies and also to attribute only the portion of those projects that are really serving growth. And that helps us to identify those project costs that would be eligible for an impact fee program. So shifting our focus to the Western Foothills, this is the area up here on the screen. You can see at the top, you can see the Broadview service area and hash marks. As you can see, this Western Foothills service area is much larger, so it would be expanding that area where you're imposing impact fees. Within that kind of peach area today, there's about 1,500 single-family dwelling units. And over the next 20 years, we anticipate an additional 1,275 could be kind of added to the area. Since we met with you in August, RH2 has worked with the city to really kind of sharpen our pencils on what the project list looks like in terms of the cost and the scopes and the extents of specific projects. All told, there's about 17 projects here that total a little over $40 million in capital investment, so a pretty substantial list of projects. Of those projects, over $30 million worth are basic fire access improvements. So these are the improvements really to make sure that this area's got the access it needs as it grows, to make sure that emergency services can come in when needed. And then $9 million of this is really to enhance the existing street network to make it more multimodal. In looking through those two types of projects, we recognize that in an impact fee context, we've got to treat them a little differently. For the $30 million in basic fire access improvements, we recognize those projects are virtually all accommodating future growth, and so virtually all of those costs are attributable to impact fees. For the more multimodal complete streets types improvements in the area, we recognize that some of that's addressing an existing need for more enhanced facilities in that area. Just given as it grows, we want to provide sidewalks and different ways for folks to move around. And so roughly half of the cost of those projects are being attributable to impact fees or to existing deficiencies. This screen here just kind of goes through our calculations, how we arrived at a maximum defensible rate. So as you can see, the 40 million kind of runs through all those filters that I described in kind of the previous slides. It arrives at that maximum defensible rate of $24,742 per equivalent residential unit. As I stated earlier, this is a rate that really represents the upper limit of what the city could charge under this program given the amount of growth that's anticipated and the projects that you're looking to fund. There is by no means a requirement that the city charge up all the way up to that full amount. Some nuts and bolts. When impact fees are determined, essentially when a project comes in for a building permit, that's when their rate vests. And when that building permit is issued, that's when the impact fee would be paid. And And in terms of, there are some provisions for residential developments to be able to postpone that payment until occupancy. And so all of that is in the proposed code language that's been provided. There are some uses that would be exempted, and we've got some of those on the screen here. Just given kind of the discussion that's been occurring tonight at the City Council meeting, I did want to highlight that low-income units would be exempted for up to 50, or it would be exempted for 80% of the fees, and that's something that's provided under state law. And multifamily uses in this area, so that could include apartments, duplexes, cottage units. They would be paying only 60% of the single-family rate, and that's based on kind of lower expectations of trip generation from each of those units. The code language that's been provided allows for applicants who maybe don't feel like they exactly match the categories that we've provided to submit an independent study that they'd have to work and get concurrence from the city engineer. And then last but not least, I did want to talk about credits, because I think that's an important one that's on everyone's mind. We know that a lot of the projects that are going to come into the Western Foothills, they are going to be building transportation infrastructure. It's not like they can just build and rely on what's there. This program would have built in the ability for them to be eligible for credits. And so here's an example here. We have a proposal with 40 single-family units that has to construct a couple of projects. And I just picked one off of the list. Project 1A is $225,000. That's our city kind of fee estimate that we're putting in the program. So if you build Project 1A, the expectation is that it's worth $225,000 in credits. This project maybe is also building another $50,000 in internal streets. So going through the calculations, 40 single-family units, using that rate assumed of $7,500, that would be about $300,000 in impact fees. The infrastructure that development is constructing is $275,000. So again, that's Project 1A plus their internal roadway network. The infrastructure that's eligible for the impact fee credits is only the infrastructure that's on the project list. Important, that's kind of consistency with state law, so that $225,000. So the amount that they would owe in impact fees once credits are taken into consideration is about $75,000, because that's the $300,000 in base impact fees, and then taking that credit for Project 1A. And so that's how we arrive at what they would actually pay.
And that's divided by the 40 lots, so it's a couple of grand per lot.
Yes.
In that instance.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So last slide here, just a reminder of what the maximum defensible rate is, but understanding that council can set the impact fee rate to anything up to that point. And your current Broadview program is about $5,000, a little bit south of that. So that's all I have, and happy to take questions.
And as Kendra mentioned earlier, it is in your ordinance that we provided a recommendation in the staff report to set the fee at $7,500, but that is up to the council's decision.
And I was looking for, the report covered the Broadview fee, which was not indexed and stayed static, and then the report talks about being able to adjust it like with WashDOTs, but I didn't see that in the ordinance.
Yeah, it is in the
ordinance.
It runs on
so
a
annually,
five-year running average of construction cost index.
So annually it can be adjusted.
Yeah, so we would come back on probably every other year basis and update those.
But that would take legislative action.
By the council to adjust the fee?
I see it in other ordinances that it's no longer has to come back to the legislative body. It's just set up to automatically do that.
I believe, I'm not 100% sure on this. I believe that it does need to be raised by council. At least that's our typical interpretation.
Okay. Municipal Research Service Center has a slightly different perspective.
Okay.
That's okay.
Okay.
Any other questions? I know we've seen it here. This is our second or third time the Public Works Committee saw it. This is the second or third time for them, so I've seen it 5 or 6 times. So I don't know if anybody else has any questions for Kendra before we hear from the audience?
I have one.
Yes.
You said the multifamily units, they pay 60% of the impact fee, and low-income housing pays 80%? Why?
They are exempted 20 or 80%, so
Oh,
they'd
okay.
only be paying 20% of the fee.
I misunderstood. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't even want to get into what's low-income housing. If it's a state definition and 80% of, or 85% of AMI, we really struggle getting units here that even fit that category. But I'm assuming it's a state definition of low-income housing? Okay. You don't have to search for them. It's,
Oh, I've got it right here. We have a definition for it. Low-income housing means housing with a monthly housing expense of no greater than 30% of 80% of the median family income adjusted for family size for Chelan County.
Okay. That means not much left.
Which is what I'm at.
Yeah, it's
So,
not very much.
Rob, do we currently do discounts like that? So our fee right now for Broadview area is 5,000. If somebody was building a 40 residential houses in there, do we currently have a discount in there for them?
As like in as in a multifamily discount?
No. The example you
The
gave,
roads.
the 1A
The roads.
example, where if they built 40 units, they would get.
I'm looking over at the author of that, and I'm going to allow him to respond.
Bobblehead is saying yes. Okay, thank you.
All right, any questions for Kendra before we hear from the audience?
Just one clarification, and then we talked about this in Public Works, but the code that we're about to adopt here includes the Broadview. The Broadview one goes away, and this now becomes the blanket for the entire area. Okay.
At least we don't have one for the whole city. Look, other cities do it citywide, so. All right, any members of the audience wish to address the city council on the impact fee ordinance that's in front of us today? Come on up, Hank. Name, address, birthday for the record.
Hank Lewis, 711 Briarwood Drive, East Wenatchee. I'm here on behalf of Deanne Schnibbe, which is one of the parties within that. She has about a 25-acre site. We've met with Rob and Steve and others kind of discussing this whole topic over the course of years. Unlike Bart, we don't have a buyer that wants to come in and take that project on right now. Unfortunately, I wish we did, and she does too.
This is sort of the 1A, 1B, 1C area on our map?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And just for the record, we're not opposed to this. We understood the Broadview's been in place for quite some time. That was no surprise. And the expansion, if you choose to do $7,500, we're not opposed to that either. My comments really are trying to read through this document and put application to the document. So for example, and this was my number 6, the first question was, I can't find anywhere in here that it talks about a 40% reduction for multifamily. Is it in here? I can't find it. So maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I've spent maybe 2 hours wandering through this. But my questions as we work through this document, so basically I have 4 or 5 questions. And I don't know how you might want me to handle that.
Just take one at a time and we'll see if our consultants and Rob can answer them.
Okay.
Questions need to be asked.
First one is on page 133. Hard to believe you have that many pages in a council agenda. It's talking about single family, and I didn't understand the 20 single family exemption or allowance for that. Rob did answer that. He says that state law must be provided for a builder to build 30 houses and exempt and defer payment of the impact fee to a later date. I didn't know, that was just new to me. Number 2 is on page 134, paragraph 8. It's stating there that if credits are granted, they'll be granted to a building permit. I believe there will be circumstances out there where there will be an opportunity for an adjacent property owner, a property owner on a road section that needs to be built, has nothing to do with a building permit, has nothing to do with a development permit. And the mechanism here is you get it as a building permit credit only. Is there other ways to compensate, to make up for those types of
I
issues?
think that's state
Don't
law, I'm
know.
almost sure. Yeah. Pretty sure that's state law, that's the only place we can put it. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead, Rob. Why don't you just come up and sit next to Hank, and the guys can
Well,
talk.
then I
about
look
it.
short, dang it.
Yeah.
I'll have to sit up front.
Yeah. So I think and we had a little conversation about this at the break, and I think what you were asking is if a developer was building a project and they had to buy like an offsite right-of-way or do offsite improvements, would they get credit? That was your question?
Well, I wasn't really going towards the developer. I was going towards the cities trying to get a fire road through it. They need to acquire property to get through a piece of property that has one lot, never anymore. So they're not going to build, no more building permits. Is there a mechanism to entice those people other than giving them credits against a building permit?
In
Which
that
states
case,
here that this is the only way that you can give it. But there are circumstances that might come to play that person wouldn't look at a credit as any value. It would mean nothing to them because it has to be used on the property that it came from.
Right, so we would.
So does that make sense?
Right,
That's all I
so we would, in that case, if I'm understanding your question, we'd be in a case of purchasing that right away from them, just as a right away.
There's a mechanism to do that.
Just
Without
like if we
question.
were building a capital improvement project,
Okay.
we
Okay.
would compensate the owner for the property that we're buying. And we could use, that's the purpose of impact fees. If you had an impact fee bucket, you could use some of your impact fee money to pay for that right away.
Yeah.
Okay. Outside of the credit program. Okay. Next one, on same page, 134, item 10, no credit shall be given for project improvements or right-of-way dedications for direct access improvements. I'm not sure what you mean by direct access improvements.
So that would be in the example where the developer was building Road 1A, but they also were building a cul-de-sac to serve their project. They're not going to get a credit for the cul-de-sac they're building because it's just serving their development. They only can get credit for the roads that we listed, or that are listed of our 17 projects.
Okay. I think that's consistent. I just want, it just happened to be the project they're using is DeAnne, although the example project happened to be 1A, so it was one of DeAnne's
I feel like I
projects.
need to answer in the form of a question.
Just like with Jeopardy?
Okay. I was a little nervous on use of funds. Page 137, paragraph 2. If these funds are being generated by these people within the foothills, this is a pretty, number 2 is a pretty broad definition of what these funds can be used for. You know, when I read a statement that says impact fees may also be used to recoup public facility improvement costs previously incurred by the city to the extent that new growth and development will be served. I mean, is that a Wenatchee Avenue improvement? I don't think so, but there's no definition there. It's not in a capital improvement program. It's not identified in the foothills plan. What exactly could be included in that? So that's the question is.
Yeah, in the opening statement there, it says that impact fees may be spent on public facility improvements as depicted in the rate study, which is incorporated here by reference. So within the rate study, we've identified the 17 projects
Absolutely.
that
That's
we
the
can
only place
spend
we can
on.
spend the money, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, until you get down to the third line and it says, but not limited to. Was that saying, but not limited to one of those projects?
Well,
But something that could be within those projects.
So we're limited to spend those on the projects, but as an example, if we hire an engineer to do a study to establish the feasibility of building a road or design it, we can use it for those teams. We could use it if we had to hire Fair and Pierce to come back and do an amendment to our impact fee ordinance, we could use impact fee funds to fund that study because it's benefiting the western foothills.
Okay, not how I read that, but I respect how you're going to handle it, but it just, to me, it came across as if past improvements that might have been done in the neighborhood, all of a sudden be free game for funds that are being generated through this program. That's the concern I got.
It can't be
Nothing more than
used
that.
for current deficiencies. It has to be for impacts to this project.
Right. I think the other thing too, just
But if the project hadn't occurred, why would you have built it for that project?
That's the point. You couldn't use this money to go back and pay for that old project.
Okay.
I think that's what you're concerned.
Well, that's exactly what it's trying to figure out where, back down to the question of an earlier hearing, the devil's in the details. And the last one is, same page, item 4, in the event that bonds or similar debt instruments, is there a plan in place for initiating funding for this program? Or is it going to rely solely on building permits as they come in? Do you have a plan for that yet?
In order to fund the whole 40 million, we have to seek alternate funding source. So as an example, we have a TIB project application right now for spring water between Western and Woodward. So that's part of the city making up the rest of that.
And bonds. Yeah.
We did, yeah. That's
Oh,
correct.
okay,
Thank you.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Okay.
I was going to a couple of things on just to, I mean, you're asking great questions. The language that you were asking about was in the old ordinance. Doesn't mean we wouldn't want to make it more clear, but it's, we only added just a couple clarifying things there. It wasn't new language. It was from the Broadview. And then the earlier question about the 0.6 for multifamily that you asked. So it is, I just had it here circled. It's, Kendra, can you, we had it there for.
One, impact fees.
I can't find it.
Oh, yeah. It was page 137.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just missed it.
1502, yeah, 110, it's there. We call that out as a specific line item.
Yeah. No, I just didn't catch it. It might conflict with the definition of a dwelling unit. Dwelling unit basically says any unit. You might want to look at that. Not by issue, but.
So we earlier,
So you're calling it a partial dwelling unit, but there's not.
So we described multifamily as attached, stacked, or cottages. That's defined in the ordinance.
Stacked?
All right, we got to move on or we're going to be here all night. So, any more questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Hank. Anybody else wish to address the council on this issue regarding impact fees? Here comes Bart. We had 2 items for you in one night, didn't we?
Hey, listen. First, I want to start by saying I favor very much what you've done, and I think going towards the $7,500 thing is the way to go. I just have to share what goes through my mind with you. We've got another 15-acre piece on Broadview, on Springwater, that's across the canal from that's being developed now. It doesn't have any offset fees because the way things are laid out. I've talked to a number of people about that, and I think I understand why, but there's no offsets. But at the $7,500 level, this could take 25 to 35% of the potential profit. And I'm just saying it makes you think about it. It makes you think, this is one where we spent a lot of money, I don't want to say it that way. We spent a lot of time and energy going to Bend and a whole bunch of places to lay out. We've got alleys and a swimming pool and park and all kinds of things. And I favor what you're doing. So what am I trying to say? It's just, the devil's in the details in all these things, I guess, is the holistic part of it. When you look at all of it, it gets difficult. It makes it hard. I favor what you're doing. I think I favor the $7,500, but I just had to share the reality of it. You know, it conceivably could make you change in how you do some of the things. So anyway, proceed.
Thanks, Bart.
Yeah.
All right, anybody else wish to address the council on the impact fee ordinance? See no other takers, I will turn it back to the city council for their action.
Your Honor, I make a motion for City Council to adopt ordinance number 2019-41 relating to Chapter 15.02, general provisions governing the assessment of impact fees for the Wenatchee City Code.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Huffaker, second by Councilmember Bailey to adopt ordinance 2019-41 relating to Chapter 15.02, general provisions governing the assessment of impact fees of the Wenatchee City Code. Any discussion? So currently, the impact fee then will go to $7,500 starting
January 1st.
January 1st. Okay. Any questions or comments from the council? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Kendra. Thanks, Rob.
I think they're getting more down.
Final budget hearing. Brad.
Good evening again. Since I've heard that the devils are in the details, I want to go through this line by line tonight.
If you want to survive.
Oh, my gosh.
Actually, since you've already seen this a couple times, I can keep this pretty short. I've got ordinance 2019-39, adopting the 2020 budget. I presented this last week, and since then, nothing has changed. So the numbers that you have seen in the past are the same numbers we have before you tonight. We just have a little extra detail with what the final budget documents will look like. So if you've got any follow-up questions from anything that you've noticed since last week, I'm happy to answer those.
And we went through it today at Finance Committee, and I don't think they had any changes, so I think it pretty much stands as is. I don't think there's anything drastically different than what we've talked about in the past. All right, any questions for Brad? Seeing none, any members of the audience wish to address the City Council on their public hearing item regarding the adoption of the 2020 final budget? Seeing no takers, I'll turn over to the council for their action.
Your Honor, I move for City Council to adopt ordinance number 2019-39, adopting the final budget for the City of Wenatchee, Washington for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2020.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Harold, second by Councilmember Markart to adopt ordinance 2019-39, adopting the final budget for the City of Wenatchee, Washington for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2020. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Your Honor, I'd just like to give my thanks to you and your staff and Brad and everybody putting this thing together and having it done at this point in time. Early in my tenure, Mark can remember these, that we went down to the
December 22nd?
December 29th or something before he finally passed the budget. It's very, very, very nice to be able to get this out of the way.
I think the reason we get it done so soon is because of the Finance Committee. I think that committee does wondrous work in terms of going over the stuff and getting comfortable with the numbers. It makes my job a ton easier, right?
Yeah.
Because at least you've got council members overlooking what we're trying to do. So I thank the Finance Committee for their work on that. And my staff, they're doing wonderful work.
I would say that the whole group of directors and staff that you have are they take the budget process seriously, they're dedicated, and they work hard on it. The directors that I work with to bring all the information together, they keep it flowing pretty smooth. So it's been fairly painless.
Good, thank you.
All right, so I'll make the mayor's report very brief. We've been doing some work with our legislators over the last couple of days, meeting with them. I did sign the boundary line adjustment for the Joe Anderson's property out on next to our Public Works. So if you've been out there lately, the fence is sort of up and you can get a really good idea of it surprised me how big that is. 2.7 acres. You get all the vegetation down and the fence is up. It really does look nice. It's going to be a beautiful addition. I'm glad we sort of stumbled into that. It's going to turn out really nice. Finance Committee directors, Transportation Council happened this week, employee breakfast on Wednesday. Thanks to the council members that came to that. Allison, help me out.
We had a good meeting with Department of Ecology this week.
Yep.
at the egg
Ecology was here for a while.
Mhm.
Were we having a work session next week?
We have a work session next week. 4 topics with one that may potentially slide depending on the museum status, but Our Valley, Our Future, and then 2 code items.
And just so you're aware, we will be meeting on the 12th. My apologies. We'll be doing sign code on the 5th. And we'll be doing billboards on the 12th and a couple of other items. So our attorney has asked us to deal with the sign code and the billboard ones separately. So we will have, might even be a 5 or 6 item meeting on the 12th. So my apologies, but I wanted to get the sign code to the finish line with this group of council members. So
Your Honor, I'm not sure if I'll be here on the 12th.
okay.
I'll have to let you know.
You can certainly call in from the Caribbean or wherever you're going to be.
No, I'm not going there. I wish. That's February.
Anything from the council members?
Your Honor, for the work session next week, I won't be here.
Okay, perfect. All right, with that, we are adjourned, 7:30 on the button.
Very good.